What's up, guys? E-Drone here, and today we're finally going to get to the review of my Tiny 6. Stay tuned. Alrighty, so let's get into it. I've got a lot of information to cram into this video, and I'm going to try to make it as short as possible. But first, I just want to go over, this is the transmitter I'm using for the Tiny 6. It is the Taranis QX7, which works very nice. And I also want to go over like charging. So charging the Tiny 6 battery using the your regular like iPad, iPod, iPhone charger has actually worked great. I did try like a regular USB that we had purchased at like a gas station, something like that. And it just took a lot longer to charge up versus using the iPhone basic little wall charger. But this charger happens to work really well in charging the Tiny 6 battery, so I just want to throw that out there and let you know about that. Alright, so moving on, in this video we're going to do 2 flights. We're going to do an indoor flight, we're going to do an outdoor flight. We're also going to be hooking up to the Betaflight and showing you the modes I set up for the Tiny 6, the different flight modes. Also, some of the settings that I found to work really well to have your Tiny 6 flying excellent. When you get your Tiny 6, this is the bind and fly version. You're going to need to bind this craft to whatever transmitter you're going to use. This process for me was quite difficult, and I've already bound it to the transmitter, and I'm going to kind of show you how I did it, but I'm not going to actually do the rebinding procedure just because it's so difficult, especially on camera. So basically, what you're going to do is, this is the XM model receiver. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to take your transmitter, if you have the QX7, you're going to turn it on.
Hi Eric, welcome back.
And I'm going to leave a link down in the description for a wonderful YouTuber, rest in peace, Project Blue Falcon. His videos will teach you how to change your custom splash screen. You saw mine said happy flying today, and add audio and sounds to all your switches. And I have watched his videos and followed his videos to do that, and I want to give credit where credit's due. So I'm not going to make a whole set of videos as to how to do that. I want to just link his video. Actually, I'm going to just link his channel, and you can go in his playlist, look for the Taranis QX7 playlist, and he will show you how to do all the custom things that you can do to this transmitter. Okay, so back to the binding. What we need to do is we need to get into the menu mode, and a page over to setup. And you're going to scroll this little wheel here. You can either go clockwise or counterclockwise. So if you're at the very top of the menu, just scroll counterclockwise once, and I'll bring you to the bottom of the menu page. You're going to click right over here to where it says bind. You're going to highlight that. You're going to push this button. It's going to start beeping. The transmitter is now in bind mode. Now, while that's chirping, what you need to do is, obviously you need to take these 2 little screws out, remove the canopy, and right here on the actual Tiny 6, on the XM receiver, there's a tiny little button that is extremely hard to push and hold that in while you power it up, whether you use the battery that's provided or a USB cable, either one, but that's what you're going to do. You're going to hold down that button on the receiver, you're going to plug it into power, and you're going to notice on the receiver, you're going to get a solid green and a solid red light. And then, once you have that done, you're going to unplug the receiver, you're going to turn off the binding, exit back out. Now you can turn back on your Tiny 6, and once you turn that back on, you'll get a solid green light, meaning you have a correct bind. And that means you're pretty much ready to go as far as your receiver talking to your transmitter. A little tip with the Tiny 6, I did notice after flying it around and kind of crashing into things that the battery does tend to slide around and move quite a bit. So, I thought about, well, maybe there's another way to secure this with a rubber band or something like that. But I actually came up with a pretty good idea. I think you guys will like it. And it's not going to add, a ton of weight. So just get you some clear, packing tape, something like this, and just kind of tape the battery itself with a little bit of that tape. It's going to make it a little bit thicker so that when you slide this battery in, once you get it where you want it, it's a lot harder to slide this battery now than it was without the tape. So I think that's a pretty good idea. The battery doesn't get that hot to where it's not going to melt the tape, anything like that. So just a little tip there if you guys are having an issue with your battery sliding around, when you have impacts and stuff like that. Because when you do have impacts, it will change your center of gravity if the battery shifts over this way or that way. But now that I've put that tape on there, it is very secure, and it does take a little bit more force, actually a lot more force, to kind of push this around. So that will keep your battery way more secure during flight. Okay, now that you have your Tiny 6 bound to your transmitter, now it is time to go ahead and hook up your USB data cable. That is, you need a USB that is a data cable. There's two different types of USB cables. So one of them is going to be a charge-only cable, and there's another one that charges and transfers data. So you need to make sure you're using a USB, a micro USB data cable. So you flip the Tiny 6 underneath on its belly, remove the battery. You will find the USB port right underneath there. So we're going to go ahead and plug this in, just like that. You're going to see it's going to start flashing and flashing. And you can see now that I have a flashing red light on the receiver because my transmitter is turned off. Now once I turn my transmitter on, you will see that light change to green. And you can see it just changed to green, meaning that now the receiver is now bound to the transmitter. So easy enough. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my transmitter back off. And we're just going to sit this Tiny 6 right here. It's very, I don't like the fact they put the micro USB underneath, because it makes it extremely hard to keep this thing flat and level. So we're just going to hold it up like this. Now that we are connected to your laptop, computer, PC, I'm just using a regular laptop here. Now that we are connected, we can go ahead and open up our Betaflight. We now have Betaflight pulled up on our laptop here, and I've already downloaded all of the CP210X drivers and all these VCP drivers and the latest version of Zadig. You're going to need to download all that if you haven't before to get your computer to be able to communicate to your flight controller of your drone. Now we are running version 3.2.2 for our configurator. We have our USB connected to the drone, and we're now going to push the connect button here. And it's connecting. And now you can see it's waiting for the data. You can now see it is now connected to the Tiny 6. Computer's running a little slow today, so sorry for that. Now you're going to get a three-dimensional little model here, and if I move the Tiny 6 here, you can kind of see how it moves it on the screen. So that's kind of neat there. It kind of gives you an idea of how well it's calibrated. But yeah, you move the Tiny 6, and your three-dimensional is going to move on your Betaflight. Now, what you're going to need to do is set up your flight modes. So what you need to go to is modes. And I already have mine set up, but from the factory it just comes in regular angle mode. So you're going to need to have your gyro turned on, and with the gyro turned on, you're going to add range, and you're going to have to set up your switches. So right here I have the arm switch. So now when I turn on my transmitter here,
Hi Eric, welcome back.
Angle mode.
you can see now that we are in angle mode. You can see the little yellow tick is underneath of the yellow slider, which you can move that. But now when I go to push down, you can see the tick mark has now moved from underneath the yellow marker here. And we scroll down, and now you can see that I am now in horizon mode. And if I click the switch again,
Acro.
we are now in acro mode. You can see the tick is now underneath no sliders, which means there is no stabilization, there is no auto leveling. It is now in acro mode. So we're going to turn this back to angle.
Angle mode.
And you can see now the tick is back underneath this yellow for angle mode. So that's how you kind of set up your switches there to make sure they're working. I also added a arm switch. That way, when I arm the motors,
Motors armed.
you can see the tick move underneath the yellow, which is going to engage the motors. Okay, so that's how you set up your flight modes. Go back to the configuration tab here, and this is going to give you all your information on how your craft is set up. I do leave the motor stop on just because it helps you with your battery life. If you hit that motor arm switch and the motors are spinning but you're not flying, that's taking extra battery use that you don't really have. So I do like to keep that on. I left disarm motors regardless of throttle value right here, so I left that on. The ESC motor protocol is going to be brushed because they are brushed motors. Your gyro and PID loop, you want to run 4 kilohertz on both. I leave the accelerometer turned on, that way I can have my different flight modes, because I do really like flying this in angle mode. Down here I have everything turned off. The black box, air mode, everything's turned off. Don't really need that for my tastes. I just left the VBAT on, but obviously it doesn't have voltage monitoring in your on-screen display. Now, what I found the best way to get this Tiny 6 to fly really nice is if you go down here to your PIDs. PID tuning tab, click on that. Okay, and these are all stock PIDs, which I think work pretty well for the Tiny 6. I've not adjusted any of the stock PIDs. I've left them all stock. And if you go here to filter settings, this is where you want to make some changes. So because this is a brushed system, you really don't need any of these filters. The filters here are more for your high power motors that have a lot of noise with your your high ESC draw and all that. So I just went ahead and turned the notch filter off, turn all these off. You see my CPU load is still at 33%, but this right here made a huge difference in how it flew and how it kind of handled with the transmitter. So before I left all these filters on, it was kind of almost like a delayed reaction. It didn't feel as quite tuned in as when I did turn all these off. So I recommend turning these off. I think you'll get a much better flight experience. Going down here to the CLI tab, we can figure out what version of Betaflight we have on the Tiny 6. All you have to do is type in version, enter, and it's going to tell you that this is the Betaflight SP Racing F3 flight controller with 3.0.1 firmware that is on the Tiny 6. If you'd like to see all the parameters of your Tiny 6, just type in dump, enter, and you will get every single setting for your Tiny 6 right here. So go back to your setup tab, and like I said, when you change the filters, let me go back to the configuration tab. Don't forget to hit save. You have to hit save and reboot after every change you make before you leave that screen, or it won't save your features there. So that's the way I have it set up. Like I said, stock PIDs, and I just turn the filtration off, and I leave the motor stop on, and I set up the 3 different flight modes. So you have angle mode, horizon mode, and acro mode on the switch. Plus I have the one switch to arm the Tiny 6, and that's how I have it all set up. So now we're going to go ahead and cut to the flight footage here. We're going to do a indoor flight footage as well as a outdoor flight footage. We'll go ahead and start with the outdoor flight footage, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about how my experience was with that. So here we go, getting ready to take off with the Tiny 6 outdoors, and I set up a little ring hoop here. I was going to try to fly through it. But first off the bat, let me tell you that I love the camera on this Tiny 6. I mean, for the size of this, the price of this, I feel like the camera is exceptional. Look how wide of a view you get. And, unlike my 5-inch racer, here you go, I just missed it there. Unlike my 5-inch racer, where you know, the Wizard, you can't see the props really, or the ducks. I actually like that you can see the ducks on the Tiny 6, being as it is so tiny, because it kind of gives you a better idea of exactly how wide of an area you have to get through. And you can see I kind of went underneath the boat canopy there. But all in all, I have to say that this thing outdoors, there was a very little wind when I flew it, and it handled exceptional. It handles so well outdoors. It's almost hard to believe that I just knocked over the hoop. It's almost hard to believe that that this could only be an indoor quad. This thing is definitely, you see the flag right there, not really moving because there wasn't much wind. But I definitely think that this quad handles outside very nicely with not a lot of wind. If you have a lot of wind, you're definitely gonna experience not so great flight. But when the wind's not blowing, this Tiny 6 handles exceptional outside. I am flying in angle mode, stabilized mode. I didn't want to do any acro flying just yet on camera. I have done a little bit off camera, and I will say it's quite a bit different than a 5-inch racer. Just because the Tiny 6 doesn't have a lot of punch when it comes to throttling up and raising altitude. It has plenty of punch when you pitch forward and you move forward. Plenty of speed there. Has no problem moving forward, and it does it quite nicely and quite fast. But when it comes to raising altitude, it struggles a little bit there. And you know, with brush motors, you can't really expect much more. But I just love the camera of this Tiny 6. It really has a good angle. And the VTX, I mean, to be something so small on this little craft, I really wasn't getting a ton of breakup. The little bit of breakup that I am getting is not bad considering the size of the VTX and all that. I decided to go ahead and play a little trick on my wife. She's actually in the car, so I said, you know what, I'm gonna scare her a little bit. But this thing is just a ton of fun. So much fun I had with this thing. I'm using the eSheen VRD2 Pro goggles with a DVR to get the footage, and this thing is just a pure joy to fly. I love flying this quad outdoors, and it really does shine outside with no wind. Flight time is not bad either, considering the size of the one cell, you know, 250 milliamp LiPo battery. I mean, that is not a huge battery. And you know, you do get a good solid 4 minutes of flight time with the Tiny 6, and it was very consistent. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and cut and end this with the indoor flight footage. And I will warn you that I crashed a lot indoors, but this thing is resilient. This thing takes a licking and keeps on ticking. It took quite a few bashes indoors, as you'll see on the footage coming up, and it just kept on running. So just stay tuned for that, because it's coming up right here in a minute. We're going to switch right on over to the indoor flight footage of the Tiny 6. As you can see, guys, I've got quite a small house, and I crashed a lot. But the Tiny Six has just kept on getting back up and flying, and it's a joy. I mean, it is so much fun to fly indoors. I wish I actually had a bigger house to fly in, but yeah, nevertheless, it handles great indoors. I did end up turning off my heat. That way, we didn't have any air blowing through the house that would kind of affected the flight. So that way, it's more of a still air environment. But yeah, set up a couple little hula hoops throughout the house to kind of fly through these little obstacles there, and just kind of flew through the house and FPV, and did a little bit of line of sight as well. But you know, as you can see, I crashed this thing so many times. I hit walls and flipped, and it just kept crashing. And it's continued to keep flying. And I am very impressed with the Tiny Six. As you can see, the battery was just about dead here. So that's going to wrap up my review of the Tiny Six by King Kong. Definitely would recommend this product. It is a great indoor tiny hoop. And thank you guys for watching. As always, please like, share, and subscribe. E-Drone out.